A scream pierced the shadows as Drake plunged the combat knife into the Threxian's throat, the spray of blue blood familiar now. Humanity's vengeance had only begun. Speeding ahead in the cloaked shuttle, Drake entered Threxian space, relying on stealth to evade their patrols. Reaching the dingy bar, he found Sivara in disguise, but too late. The screech of disruptor rifles echoed as Threxians burst through the doorway, trapping them. Drake met Sivara's eyes, knowing failure doomed humanity's last hope. The final war began here. The tables flipped over, glasses shattered on the floor. Drake grabbed his plasma gun. Its hum cut through the noise. Threxian agents flooded the bar, waving rifles. They yelled over the shooting. "Move!" Drake shoved Sivara behind a table. A bolt burned the wall above them. Drake fired back. His body snapped into action. Muscle memory took over. Sivara scrambled to a service droid. She ripped open its panel, crossed wires. The droid sprung to life and crashed into a soldier. "Let's go," Drake said. Sivara nodded. They ran for the back door, bolts scorching the walls around them. They burst outside. A patrol cruiser rose up, targeting them. Drake pushed Sivara into their shuttle. The engines whined, ready. They lifted off as the cruiser fired. Drake's hands danced on the controls. The shuttle swooped between buildings. The cruiser lagged behind, too big to keep up. Clouds loomed ahead. Drake shot upwards, the cruiser's bolts a firestorm below. They broke through the clouds. Sivara breathed hard, eyes wide. She looked at Drake, afraid but ready. "I have a tracker," she said, panicking. "They implanted it." Drake cursed, adjusted course. The indomitable spirit waited. The tracker put them at risk. He pushed the throttle. They had to move faster. "We'll handle it," he said, hoping he sounded confident. "We always do." The alarm screamed through the blackness of space. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Drake's heart pounded as he saw the Threxian ships on the radar, blocking their way. "Damn it! They got here too fast. We have a rat." His hand stayed steady on the shuttle controls. Sivara's face tightened, but her voice stayed calm and urgent. "What do we do now?" Drake's mind raced for ideas. "Faking our death is our only chance." He turned the radio to a wide signal. "Sending the surrender signal." His finger pressed the button to broadcast a distress call to the Threxian ships. Static hissed before Admiral Craxis's voice boomed from the speakers, full of smug arrogance. "Surrendering already, human scum?" Without a word, Drake slipped from his seat and hurried to the engine room. He knelt by the reactor, rerouting power and disabling the safety controls. Sivara whispered over the radio, her voice barely louder than the shuttle's hum. "You're sure about this?" "It's the only way," Drake said. His hands moved with precision on the reactor controls, every action planned. When the adjustments were set, Drake led Sivara to the cargo hold. "Stay here," he said, as he sealed the thick, lead-lined door. The reactor's whine grew louder as it approached meltdown. Oblivious, Craxis let a smug grin spread across his face. His flagship connected to the shuttle, magnetically locking the hatches. "Come out, humans," his voice boomed. "Face your fate." Drake watched the countdown tick lower on his wrist screen, seconds slipping away until detonation. "Now," he whispered as the reactor hit its limit. The explosion went silent in the vacuum of space, but its force was cataclysmic. The shuttle blew apart in a searing white blaze, consuming the flagship's docking bay in swirling metal and flames. The Threxian ship shuddered under the unexpected blast, systems failing, hull ripped open. Craxis's fleet erupted into confusion, chaotic voices crackling over the radio channels. In the bedlam, Drake forced open the cargo hold's twisted hatch. Sivara coughed on swirling dust, but stayed right behind him. "This way," Drake coughed out, pulling her toward the shuttle's escape pod bay, masked by the explosion's aftermath. They climbed into a Threxian pod, identical to all the others. Drake launched it into the debris field alongside frantic Threxian evacuees. Their pod, indistinguishable among the others, fleeing the crippled flagship, sailed away unnoticed into the blackness of space. Chaos surrounded the Threxian fleet, like debris trapped in orbit. Drake flew the stolen pod, scanning the radar for a safe place to land. Sivara bent over the console, fingers flying across the keys. She worked fast, like someone defusing a bomb. "That moon, can we make it?" Drake pointed. Sivara nodded, eyes glued to the screen. "Just enough fuel left." The pod dropped toward the lifeless grey moon. Thrusters kicked up dust as they landed at an ancient mining facility. The pod settled with a grind of metal on metal. Drake unbuckled, glancing around the huge, shadowy place. Rust ate at the old machines. Sparse light filtered through the cracked dome overhead. The air smelled like rust. This place was ancient, but would work. Sivara set up her console, taken from the pod. "The Threxians think in hierarchy and honor," she said, "so we'll give them exactly that. I'll pretend to be a Threxian commander bragging about a victory." Drake watched over her shoulder. "And our guys?" "Our guys are smart. They'll doubt a victory this easy." Drake felt uneasy, but had to trust them. Sivara sent the fake message, her voice disguised to sound like a Threxian. The radio crackled with the bogus report of captured human operatives. Drake's gut twisted, hearing the lie go out. Now we wait. The silence felt heavy until Sivara turned to Drake, face serious. "There's something you should know. The Threxians built a weapon. It can destroy whole planets." Her words hit Drake like a punch to the gut. The line between life and total destruction was razor thin now. "Where is it?" Drake asked, voice taut. Sivara pulled up diagrams on the screen showing something horrific. "Here, but reaching it won't be simple." As they studied the plans, the facility groaned to life with flickering lights. Drake tensed like a wire pulled too tight. "What is it?" Sivara asked. Drake's eyes darted around. "Power fluctuations. This place should be dead, unless we're not alone here." His hand edged toward his weapon. They stood in silence. The only sounds were their breath and the console's soft hum. Drake looked around the huge room. He saw rusted pipes running along the walls. The humming machines told him nothing. Something was awake down in the mine. Something dangerous. Sivara crouched next to an open control panel. Her fingers moved fast across the wires and circuits. She changed the routes, rerouted things. The screen came on, lines of code scrolled down. "Got it," she said. "Someone's hacking the defenses." "Threxians!" Drake kept his voice low. The enemy was too far away to hear them. "No, too careful for them. Has to be a spy." Her hands kept moving on the wires. Drake walked around, looking for good spots to defend from. He found old drills and laser cutters left from mining days. He started rigging them up, calculating as he went. He'd turned the tunnels into a death trap for intruders. Sivara fought the hacker in silence, face beaded with sweat. A beep echoed. "I'm in," she said. "Control's ours now." They'd turned the tomb of a mine into a fortress. Sivara set up cameras. Drake watched the screens. The dusty paths were empty. They waited without a sound, still as the dead machines around them. Soon a ship hissed and clanked down outside. Boots crunched gravel. Voices echoed down the halls. Drake tightened his grip on the plasma gun. The mercenaries thought they were the hunters. They'd walked right into the trap instead. Drake watched the screens as they moved, confident, careless. When they hit the choke point, a drill whirred up, and the blade caught light, then screams. Panic spread as the base came alive against them. Guns dropped, drones zoomed. The mercs fired wildly, but the machines were relentless and precise. Drake just watched, the gun now a comfort in his hand. The base did the work. When the echoes of battle died, Drake moved through the silent halls, stepping over the dead. One stood out, maybe the leader. Drake searched him and found a data chip. He showed it to Sivara back at the controls. Found this on one. Names, dates spilled out as she read it, a web of corruption in the coalition. "There's more," she said, voice like steel. "The Threxian weapon. They'll demonstrate it soon." Drake's jaw tightened at the coordinates and time. "We have to stop them." Sivara looked into his eyes, resolute despite the weariness. "Then we will." They stood united in the old mine, ready to decide humanity's fate. Drake greased his hands, fixing the last bolt on the old Threxian ship's thruster. Sivara fed wiring into the console. Her fingers moved fast. "We need to go before the convoy comes," she said, eyes still on the flickering screen. "We will," Drake said. He slammed the panel closed. "Thrusters are done." He looked at their work. The ship was beat up with sharp Threxian angles, but it would fly. That's what mattered. Sivara punched the console. It lit up. The engines growled awake, like Drake felt. "Setting course," Sivara said. "We'll blend with the mining convoy, hide our energy." Drake nodded, watching her plot the course. "Tell me about the World Ender," he said. His voice sounded calm, but rage boiled inside. "The World Ender collapses stars, turns suns into supernovas. The Threxians built it in secret, their final war move," Sivara explained. Drake clenched his jaw. The Threxians faked peace, hid a dagger. "We'll stop them," he rumbled. His chest promised it. They finished prepping. The ship hummed as they left the facility. Radar showed the convoy ahead, a line of blips. Drake eased them behind the convoy, just another shape in space. Hours passed drifting behind the convoy. Sivara watched the sensors. Their disguise held. Drake sat ready, muscles tense, waiting for any sign of trouble. The indomitable Spirit came into view. A huge human ship. Drake signaled it, used old codes. Seconds passed waiting for a response. His hand hovered over the controls, ready to bolt. A familiar voice answered. "Drake, you son of a gun, we thought you were dead." Half a smile pulled Drake's face. "Not yet. Permission to board?" "Granted. Bring that intel." They docked with the Spirit. Soldiers stared as Drake and Sivara walked by. Whispers followed them through the halls. In the strategy room, Drake looked out at the strike team, battle-hardened men and women. Their eyes said they would follow him anywhere. "We've got one shot," Drake said steady. "The World Ender will be used soon. We stop it first, or we don't get another chance." Heads nodded, eyes on Drake. He continued. "We go in quiet, hit hard, leave nothing that threatens home." Heads nodded, faces set hard with determination. "We're humanity," Drake said. His words rang out. "We don't quit without a fight." The team geared up silent and efficient. Drake watched them, pride swelling. They were outgunned, but not outmatched, not with human will. Sivara came over, face serious. "We're ready, Drake." He nodded. His heart pounded. "Let's move out." As they boarded the stealth ship, Drake felt the mission's weight. They would succeed, he vowed silently. For humanity, they would succeed. Drake double-checked the coordinates. "Jumping in 3, 2, 1. The asteroids at the edge of the system appeared. His team hid among them, watching the enemy ships swarming above. Massive cruisers and darting fighters waited for the World Ender reveal. The plan was ready. "Remember, we're scientists here for the show," Drake whispered. His team nodded, faces hidden by stolen Threxian helmets. Sivara handed out the forged IDs, holograms shimmering. They looked real enough to work. Everyone grabbed uniforms, a mishmash of Threxian ranks. They stepped into disguises, the fabric foreign but needed. Drake felt the restricting armor and helmet. They checked each other's gear, ensuring no human skin showed. The strike team boarded a scrubbed shuttle and approached the looming station. Drake piloted into a docking bay. They walked out like they belonged there. Sivara led, head high. She showed her ID and the guards waved them by. They split up, each with a task. Drake watched his team plant charges by arrays, small and hidden. Wires snaked into darkness, leading back to his transmitter. Sivara led Drake to the core, the heart of the World Ender, massive, pulsing. She pulled out schematics, tracing conduits. "Reroute these, and when they activate it, kaboom!" Drake followed her fingers, the humming core unaware of its danger. He grabbed the remote from his bag. "Charges set. Hit this and we start our work as chaos erupts." He pocketed it, ready. The station buzzed with activity. Timing was everything. Drake's hand lingered on the button. No mistakes allowed. Flawless execution required. This was their one shot. The weight of stars hung on them, tipping the balance. The engineer's low chatter mixed with the machine's hum in the control room. Green lights flashed on the panels like stars. The giant window showed outer space. The World Ender floated there. Sivara leaned over a panel. The screen glowed on her face. She keyed in commands fast and sure. Drake stood nearby in his Threxian disguise. He held a small transmitter in his sleeve. It connected to the human strike team waiting unseen. A Threxian engineer came to Sivara, its brow furrowed. "Why are you here?" it asked in its gruff, translated voice. Sivara turned to it coolly. Her voice had authority. "I'm checking the launch sequence. Your command center needed it, for best calibration for the demonstration." She used technical words and procedures. They hid her real goal. The engineer looked confused at her and the panel. Sivara kept talking. "See the phase variance here. It could flux the energy flow. Crucial." The engineer stared, then nodded reluctantly. It turned back to its panel. The demo was starting soon. Tension grew as the countdown began overhead. Activating World Ender in 10-9. Drake and Sivara locked eyes for a second. His thumb held over the transmitter button. A silent message. She nodded slightly, still working the panel. 3, 2, 1, activation. Drake pressed the button. Far away, the bombs blew the comma rays precisely. The blast shook the station. Alarms screamed. In the control room, the engineers panicked. "What's happening?" one shouted. Warnings blinked red. Drake went to a panel quickly. "The core flux is unstable. Check backup." His voice sounded scared, like a Threxian. The engineers scrambled, confused. Sivara worked her panel fast. Screens flashed as she entered the code. She turned the core's energy inward. Shouts filled the chaotic room. Drake ran panel to panel. He called out false commands. His heart pounded. Not fear. The thrill of their plan at the edge of success. Outside, the world ender glowed. Sivara's redirect worked. She looked up and nodded at Drake. It was done. In the panic, they slipped away unseen, their part finished. The world ender would fail. Together, they had struck silently. The stars were safe. The Threxians didn't see them leave through a hatch. They would return to fight again another day. The alarm screamed as Sivara's fingers flew over the controls. Her focus locked tight, ignoring the red warning lights flashing across her face. Drake stood by the only door, plasma gun ready. He scanned the room, muscles tight for the attack. The panel exploded as Threxian soldiers charged in, their shouts lost in the alarms. They took aim at Drake and Sivara. Drake fired first. The plasma bolt seared bright across the dim room and hit a Threxian in the chest. He fell back against the controls, the smell of burnt metal and flesh in the air. "Keep working," Drake yelled over the noise. "Almost there," Sivara shouted back, hands a blur on the console. Drake moved like a cornered beast, dodging shots and firing back. The tight space made the fight personal. Each Threxian seemed to share one goal: eliminate the humans. Drake's training took over, every shot and move deliberate. "Got it! Loops inverted," Sivara called out. A soldier lunged at Drake, knife glinting in the flashing lights. Drake twisted away, the blade missing by centimeters. He slammed the gun into the soldier's face. The Threxian's helmet cracked, and he stumbled back, stunned. The control room rumbled as the world ender began its sequence. The core pulsed, the rhythm accelerating. Sivara slammed her hand down, activating the weapon. "Run!" she screamed, grabbing Drake's arm. The core lit up, bright enough to blind. Drake and Sivara sprinted for the maintenance shaft as the structure groaned. The floor heaved as the inverted loop consumed the station. They dove into the shaft just before it collapsed. They crawled through the conduits, scraping elbows and knees on the metal. The station shook, the ceiling caving in behind them. The noise was deafening between the crumbling metal and the dying stars' roar. They tumbled into space, the air ripped away. The stars blinked coldly around them. Sivara gasped for breath, eyes shocked wide. Drake pulled her close with one arm. The Threxian ships spun in chaos, crashing into each other without the world ender's lead. Human spacesuits appeared from the void, the rest of the strike team. They moved with efficiency, reaching for Drake and Sivara. The cruiser hid in debris, waiting to pull them to safety. Watching the Threxians' desperate attempts to recover, Drake and Sivara clung together. Against the odds, they had won. The humans lived, and the world ender died. The Threxians learned too late to never anger a human. Drake stood on the bridge, hands firm on the railing. He looked over the fleet. Retrofitted ships of all sizes filled his view. The command deck buzzed. Officers shouted orders. Displays flickered with new data. "Movement across enemy lines, sir," an officer said. Drake checked the tactical screen. Red dots marked the chaotic enemy ships. Their superweapon was destroyed. "Hit them hard. We'll never get a better chance," Drake said. He radioed the fleet. "Engage the cruisers first. Shields are weak from the blast." The graceful human ships glided in. Plasma cannons charged, glowing on the hulls. Torpedoes loaded into silos, aimed and ready. The bulky Threxian ships scrambled into a line. Drake watched the screens closely. His time behind enemy lines had honed his tactical skills. He sensed the Threxian confusion and fear. "Echo Squadron, use the asteroids. You're clear to engage," he said. The nimble fighters darted into the rocks. They emerged behind a cruiser, firing non-stop. The cruiser's shields flared and failed. It exploded into fragments with the final shots. Cheers erupted on the bridge. Drake stayed focused. Sivara stood beside him, studying her console. "If we take out their comms, we blind them," she said urgently. Drake nodded. "Do it. Target the arrays." He told comms, "Send codes to Gamma Team." The deadly dance went on in space. Human ships wove wildly through the Threxians. The big cruisers struggled to keep up. Gamma Team zipped at the command ship, dodging fire. Their torpedoes spiraled in and blew the comm arrays apart. Static filled the screens, then silence. "They're blind," Drake said with satisfaction. "Press the attack." The coalition ships swarmed in. Their combined fire overwhelmed the Threxians. Drake watched the enemy ships break formation as their command fell apart. New readings appeared on Drake's screen. He frowned. "See this ripple? It could be another superweapon." Sivara studied the data. "Too early to confirm, but you may be right." Drake took a deep breath, filing the concern away for later. "Keep monitoring. For now, we end this." The relentless human fleet exploited every weakness and drove the Threxians into full retreat. Their once feared fleet ran for their lives. As the last enemy ships escaped, Drake allowed himself a moment of accomplishment. The bridge crew cheered, but his thoughts moved to the next fight. The war was far from over, and if there were more superweapons, humanity would be ready. Drake stood in the briefing room at attention, with sharp lights on his face. Sivara sat by him, straight and focused. The room filled with soldiers and intelligence officers, with lines on their faces from battles and no sleep. "Report, Drake," General Harris said in a loud voice. "We took out the World Ender, but there are more," Drake said firmly. "The database gave us clues, places for others." Sivara showed a map on the screen with blinking dots. "These are possible sites." The room stirred with whispers. Eyes moved to the map, worried or calculating. "Your team handles this?" a woman officer with silver hair asked. "Yes," Drake said, locking eyes with her. "We have momentum. Time to hit them hard and fast." General Harris leaned forward with fingers together. "What's your task force name?" Drake looked at Sivara briefly. "Spearhead. We pierce their defenses and dismantle the threats." Sounds of approval came from the table. Sivara zoomed in on a dot. "First target, Rigel system," she said. "Intel on a site there." General Harris stood and the room went silent. "Spearhead is a go at 500, Drake." Drake saluted. "Yes, sir." Drake and Sivara walked to the planning bay, boots echoing on the metal floor. The bay buzzed with activity. Crew hurried between stations, gathering data and plans. Drake went to the holotable, Sivara behind him. She uploaded the intel. Technicians absorbed it, fingers flying. Drake pointed at the asteroid belt. "Cover for our approach. They won't see us." Sivara nodded, simulating their path through the field. "Have to navigate carefully. Sensors are dense here." She outlined their course through the digital asteroids. Technicians took notes, huddled close. Drake watched, anticipating crippling the Threxians. Soldiers in grey uniforms marched in and lined up. Drake swelled with pride seeing them, the best, knowing the risks. "Listen," Drake called. The bay went silent. We're spearhead. Find and destroy the world enders. We cut deep. The soldiers' faces showed resolve, bodies tense with purpose. Drake turned to a fierce young lieutenant. Prep the stealth ships fully armed. Leave nothing to chance. Yes, Commander, the lieutenant replied and left to follow orders. They'll be desperate to hit back, Sivara said, reviewing a data pad. Expect traps, maybe a fleet waiting. Drake nodded. We'll be ready. Every mission is risky, but we take the fight to them now. The intensity of his team fueled Drake's determination. He looked around at the will to survive in every face. Let's prep, he said. We have a galaxy to save. Drake and Sivara left the bay, the Coalition's determination with them. The work would be hard, dangerous, but in their eyes, only victory mattered. The ice planet's cold bit through their suits, but Drake's team didn't flinch. They checked gear to make sure no skin touched the freezing air. Sivara double-checked her suit seals from habit, not fear. The stealth sleds hummed low and quiet, ready to skim the frozen ground. Drake eyed his team. They knew the stakes. This is it, he said. His voice cut through the wind. Stick to the plan. Watch each other's backs. The team nodded and split in two. Drake led the main group, suited figures against the stark white. Sivara joined the smaller team, moving like silent shadows. Drake's team moved out. The sleds left faint trails in the snow. The ice cliffs loomed ahead, sharp spires in the distance. As they got close, lights cut through the dark. Searchlights scanned for intruders. Ready? Drake's voice crackled over comms and his team answered together. Ready! The attack launched precisely. Blasters fired plasma at the base. Return fire lit the night, turning the ice cliffs into a maze. Drake led the charge, guiding his sled through the fire, ducking and weaving. Threxians poured out, blasters hot and angry. A fierce fight unfolded as the ice grew slick. Meanwhile, Sivara's team crept to the facility. They hacked the gate quickly and slipped inside. Their boots were silent on the metal floor. Screens covered the walls with flickering data. Sivara connected her tablet. Code streamed past until... There, she said. Triumph tinged her tone. Just research. We need all of this. Her team downloaded terabytes of data. The outpost detected the breach. Systems blared angry alarms. An automated voice declared self-destruct, a final protection. Sivara met her team's eyes. Time to go. They raced back out, data secure. As they reached the surface, the ground shook. The walls cracked, then buckled. Flames licked the sky, fire against the cold. Drake saw the blast from his spot, heart in throat until he heard Sivara's voice. We're clear, she said, relief thick in her tone. The sleds turned, engines pushed to the limit. They raced from the dying base. Drake's team rejoined and took defense until Sivara's sled appeared. They gathered, breathing fogging helmets, looking back as rubble remained. Drake met Sivara's gaze, face stern behind the visor. Let's get out of here. We got what we need. The strike team left silently as they arrived. The ice planet's harshness receded as their cold mission succeeded. Drake typed on a hollow keyboard. Codes and blue schematics floated on the screen next to him. Sivara scanned the complex data over his shoulder. Drake said in a steady, low voice, We need to hit them at the source, the scientists and engineers who make the weapons. Sivara nodded. Attack their network. They set up a plan in a coalition safe house. Screens floated around, showing Threxian weapon data. One screen showed a convoy route for an engineer. Another showed a bunker with scientists inside thick, guarded walls. The team got ready silently. They wore tight black suits and checked weapons. Clicks echoed as they readied up. Drake looked each member in the eyes. They nodded back. The plan was clear. Stealth, said Drake. Get in and out quick. No mess. They hid in moon craters and waited for the convoy. Vehicles rumbled, unaware of watching eyes. At Drake's signal, they attacked. EMPs fried the convoy's electronics. The team swung down and grabbed a scientist from the stopped vehicles. They vanished into the dark, leaving confusion. Sivara monitored from the ship. Drake told her the convoy was done. She found coordinates for the bunker target. Good work. Next is the bunker. At the bunker, they cut fences and planted a charge on the metal door. It exploded with a thump, crumpling open. Alarms blared inside. Drake went through the smoking doorway, team behind him. Soldiers defended, shooting energy blasts. The team used cover and hand signals. They fought their way closer. They broke into the lab. A scientist froze by his console. Drake grabbed his arm and pulled him along. "You're coming with us. We're here for you, not to kill." They left the bunker with the scientist. Sivara waited to take them away. Back at base, they kept the scientists captive for interrogation. Bit by bit, intel helped build a picture of the Threxian weapons. Each success let Drake's team learn more and plan their next invisible attack against the war machine. Drake stared at the console screen, watching the dots and dashes scroll too fast for a normal human. "That's no Threxian or our signal," he said, leaning in. Sivara looked at the flashing anomaly on the display. "What is it?" "Let's find out." Drake tapped the console, changing course toward the signal. The ship's engines hummed, steering them ahead.
They found the old Scout station hidden in an asteroid field. It was dark, no lights inside, no ships docked, like a ghost waiting silently in space.
Drake and Sivara suited up and entered through a hole in the hull. They floated down corridors with strange symbols etched on the metal walls. Dim lights came on, noticing them. Drake kept his hand on his plasma pistol, but nothing happened. They entered a large room in the station's core. Panels and consoles blinked alive, untouched for ages. In the center, a glowing pillar of unknown material pulsed with captive starlight. "This tech beyond us, beyond the Threxians," Sivara whispered, eyes wide. Drake's fingers hovered over the controls, cautious yet awed. "Could end the war," he breathed. "But if we use it, defenses could activate. A trap," Sivara countered, watching the pillar. "We have to try," Drake said. "The world enders are too dangerous. If this can stop them, we owe humanity that chance." Sivara nodded. "Let's get to work." They spent hours decoding symbols, awakening the old systems. They traced the energy flow to the core. When Drake entered a sequence, the pillar thrummed louder. The light focused into a beam, bathing the room in clean glow. The energy pulsed, promising. "We just found a new ally," Drake smiled. Sivara chuckled. "Hope it's friendly." Together, they watched the light play on the walls, the station's secrets unfolding. The discovery held hope of defeating the Threxians and their world enders. But as the beam grew stronger, Drake and Sivara stood ready, aware the ancient builders may have left more than just energy behind. Drake hid in the shadows as the crowded halls of Coalition headquarters buzzed with joy. His gut burned with tension, even though people laughed and celebrated. Sivara caught his eye from across the room, just for a second. That was enough to say everything they needed. They knew something was rotten. A council member cared more about greed than loyalty. Drake's earpiece crackled. Sivara's whisper was lost in the noise. "Councillor Jorvik," she said. "He's talked to the Threxians. Money went to his accounts. There's more." Drake felt like he'd been punched. He watched Jorvik laugh with the council, dressed in his fancy ceremonial clothes. The betrayal burned Drake like acid in his veins. People trusted Jorvik. They respected him. But he profited from the war while others died. For days and nights, Drake followed Jorvik, listening to secret talks, snapping photos of hidden meetings. Drake was a ghost to the living. He sent everything to Sivara. She wove it into a web of lies too big to hide. Drake sat in his dark room watching the last surveillance video. Enough to ruin Jorvik, enough to rip out the rot. The silence warned Drake. He rolled from the chair just before a silent bullet sailed through where his head had been. His own gun was in his hand as the room exploded with gunshots. Drake stayed calm even as his heart raced. He fired back at the faceless attackers, every shot a promise to survive. Glass shattered as Drake leapt through the window. He landed hard on the alley stones. He ran. Bullets chased him while the Coalition celebrated, oblivious. "Sivara, they're after me," Drake said into his comm. "Jorvik knows." Static hissed, then her cool voice. "Understood. Go dark. I'll handle this. Stay alive." "Will do," Drake breathed. He scanned for cover. There was no going back to the light yet. In the days after, Drake became a ghost. No digital trail, no calls, just cold alleys and a few allies who thought him dead but felt him there. His name faded to memory. He used his death as a cloak to strike from the shadows when the time came. Jorvik, blind to the hunter, went on as normal, but Drake watched and waited. Jorvik had made a mistake. He'd made a human angry. Drake leaned over the stained bar as the stink of unwashed people filled his nose. The low buzz of hushed talk and clinking glasses echoed around him. He knew the criminals here, smugglers, hackers, anyone living outside the law. But they owed him favors. A guy with an eye patch sat next to Drake and slid over a data chip without a word. "Thanks, Carv," Drake said as he passed a stack of untraceable credits back. Drake pulled his hood up as he walked through the market, taking odd turns to lose any followers. He knocked on an unlabeled door and entered the hacker's den inside. Screens covered the walls, while a lone hacker typed fast at a console. "Need help, Lex?" Drake said. Lex kept typing, not looking over. "Usual price. My name stays out of this," Lex replied. Drake transferred the payment. Over days, Drake pieced together the lies. Lex cracked databases, while Drake untangled the web of deceit with each new piece of evidence. Counselor Jorvik sat at the center of betrayal, floating underneath the surface like an iceberg. Drake compiled proof, money trails, secret communications, covert meetings, all leading back to Jorvik. With enough evidence to expose everything, Drake knew it was time to act. Lex patched him into the broadcast system, ready to hijack every screen. Drake watched the timer as the summit started. "Ready when you are," Lex said. Drake nodded. "Do it." Jorvik's web of lies appeared on screens across human space. Drake's evidence showed the depth of greed and betrayal. Audio, video, documents, all exposed the truth. People watched in shock as reality stared back. Outrage boiled over. Voices yelled from streets demanding justice. Security ships flew in, bright against the sky. Jorvik and others found themselves in handcuffs. Their schemes lay in ruins for all to see. When things settled, Drake stepped from an alley, shadow long in the sunset. The rot had been cut out. The coalition could breathe, clean and strong again. The new dawn waited. Drake walked on, ready to meet it. Drake smelled victory in coalition's hot breath. He was ready. He eyed the massive station orbiting the gas giant, lit bright. The team was pumped to fight. They had cleared out the weak links and stood strong. The stealth ships slid silently past defenses. The dark hull grew close as they approached to dock. Drake felt the soft thud through his boots when they connected. His squad floated behind him, blending into the shadows. "Helmets on, weapons ready. Hit them fast and hard," Drake commanded, sharp and direct. Magnetic boots clamped down with heavy clunks as the team armed up, prepared to breach. The doors hissed open. Waiting Threxian troops sprung into action, chaotic like a hive kicked. They came at them, guns blazing, armored and ready. Bolt fire screamed past Drake's squad, just missing them. Fighting with no gravity was a cruel, disorienting dance. A burst from your pack could send you spinning. The Threxian's shots went wide while the human's training paid off. A bolt slammed one, sending his lifeless body drifting off into the darkness. Sivara's fingers flew fast over the console. "I'm in, buy me time." Drake and another fired back-to-back, covering Sivara. They shifted together, in sync with the station's pulse. Their aim was true. Threxians fell with suits leaking air. "Uploading the virus now," Sivara called out. Screens flickered as shouts of confusion filled the station. Their networks crumbled, blind and deaf. Drake and his team quickly retreated back to their ship. As they launched away, the lights on the hub blinked out. "Comms are dead, they can't see a thing," Sivara confirmed, cool but triumphant. Their craft slipped away unseen. The coalition fleet advanced on cue from Drake's intel, like wolves descending on prey. The tide had turned. Humanity struck back with the coalition's might behind them. Panic exploded across the comms. "Threxians attacking Earth." Drake's fingers hammered his console, changing course. The stars streaked as they jumped home. Earth filled the view screen, burning with explosions and enemy fire. Drake's gut knotted up. He'd seen battles, but this was home. "All ships, form up on me. Delta formation, protect the platforms." Drake barked orders. Small fighters swarmed the dreadnought's guns. The Threxians pushed hard, but the platforms stayed coordinated under Drake, firing steady bursts. the blackness of space filled with raging war. Below, the ground rumbled as Earth's armies took to the skies in anything that could fly. Missiles streaked up at the Threxians. Burnt metal stench filled the command deck. Drake watched his screens flicker with the give and take as fighters fell. Then a comms light winked. Sivara's team. "Drake, we located another world ender. Coordinates incoming." Drake breathed deep, holding the news close. "Acknowledged." He turned to his crew. "Stay on them. This is our home." The dreadnoughts retreated under the pounding. On Earth, people cheered from rooftops, united against the enemy. Drake's image, beamed from the battle, became a symbol to keep fighting. His name echoed in their cries. The battle for Earth raged on, every volley a statement. Humanity would not bend. When the last enemy ship left Earth's sky, Drake knew the victory was more than one fight. It was a promise humanity would endure, unbroken. The engines of Drake's ship rumbled as his heart raced. He sat focused in the command chair. Sivara spoke fast into her console, coordinating allies in secret. Screens blinked star maps and ship positions. She finished and turned to Drake. "All set, they'll attack on your word," she said with no doubt. Drake nodded and tapped the keyboard. Links opened to every ship, every squad. "Let's begin. No turning back now," he said. The fleet of ships from all human planets flew together toward the Threxians. Drake's ship cut through enemy lines. Stars blurred as they punched forward. Below, dropships landed. Doors flung wide. Soldiers ran out, breath misting, weapons ready. Their blasters flashed trading shots with Threxians. Boots thudded the ground as they pushed ahead. Inside the base, Drake's team moved quiet but for gear clinks. They slid through shadows to a thick door built to withstand attack. Not this time. Drake set a charge on its edge, waved his team back, and hit the trigger. Boom! The door bent in. Alarms wailed. Drake charged through the breach, Sivara with him. Enemy soldiers rushed them. Drake's team fired fast and accurate. The surprised enemies fell. Sivara's eyes scanned the halls. "This way," she said. They moved through the maze, nearing the weapon's heart each turn. At another pulsing door, Drake's team stacked up. Drake looked at the door. "Ready?" Nods all around. He opened the door. Inside, the core glowed, lighting conduits like veins. Drake sensed the hum of its power. Sivara raced to a console, fingers flying. Drake guarded her from attacking soldiers. Shots ricocheted off walls. "Almost there," Sivara grunted. Drake downed another soldier. Their numbers dropped as the attack weakened. Then a click. Sivara stepped back, finished. The core dimmed, flickered, then flared. Consuming light filled the room as the ender destroyed itself. They ran back through conquered halls. The base shook with the weapon's death. They emerged outside as ground troops pushed the last Threxians away. The ender was gone, another human victory complete. Drake looked over the battlefield, meeting his team's eyes through their foggy, breath-misting visors. They had succeeded. They stopped the threat this time too, showing the determination of the human spirit. Drake nodded to his team and looked up at the stars. The galaxy still held secrets, but Earth was safe for now. They had ensured humanity would see another day. The base halls were like veins in a living body. They moved power and purpose through them. The walls were hard and would last forever. At every corner, Drake's team found new problems. Laser lines sliced the air suddenly. Guns came out from hidden holes in the walls. Armored doors slammed down hard, locking tight. Sivara's voice came through their headsets. It stayed calm, even though they heard her typing fast in the background. "I've got the gun grid. Shutting down in 3, 2, 1, go!" The lights on the guns turned off. Drake waved his hand sharply. His team ran forward, boots hitting the metal floor. He glanced back and saw a gun stop moving right before it powered off. Up ahead was the last door, a giant reinforced steel slab guarding the core like a silent guard. "Doors next," Sivara said. Drake heard the strain in her voice even though she stayed in control. They all heard her typing fast to break the last of the base's security. A soft chime sounded as the door unlocked, the sound of winning even with chaos around them. Drake pushed on the door, muscles straining against the weight. It opened with a long groan, showing the core room, the heart of the enemy's power. The core was huge, with wires and tubes coming out from it like seeking roots. Energy pulsed at its center, an evil mimic of a heartbeat. It lit the room with ominous light, making long, dancing shadows that moved to the rhythm of oncoming doom. "Problem," Sivara said sharply. Her resolve was firm, but they heard the urgency. "They started the charge cycle early. It's aimed at Earth." Drake looked at the readout, the numbers climbing steadily up to disaster. His team shared grim, accepting looks. They knew what this meant. "Can't stop it, Drake," Sivara said, "but we can redirect it." Drake met Sivara's eyes on the screen, a silent talk between them. This was it, the biggest gamble. "Do it," he commanded in a steel voice. Sivara worked fast, her fingers a blur. She changed where the energy went, using the weapon against its own masters. The room shook with the redirected power. A beast turned on its handler. Drake's team held their breath as the core shuddered, then roared to life. Screens lit up with the raw, unleashed energy's frightening beauty. Through the windows, the enemy ships came into view, once bringers of death, but now targets. The core screamed and the beam shot out, a column of total destruction that did not pick sides. The enemy ships, posed in triumph around the planet, became outlines against the blinding light. One by one they exploded like glass under a hammer, metal and flesh vaporized in an instant. Silence filled the core room heavily, weighted with what they'd done. They had beaten fate's hand, turned hunter into prey. Sivara's voice interrupted the quiet, a touch of awe under her tiredness. "It's done. The ships are gone." Drake nodded, a weary titan among ruined gods. "Humanity wins," he said softly, a promise, not a boast. His battered team turned to him, waiting. "We go home," he told them. And they did, through the maze they'd beaten, past the now silent enemy guns, out into open space that had always been theirs. They left the base behind, now a tomb to the hierarchy that had threatened all they cared for. The human spirit, unbeatable, had carved victory from defeat's jaws. The stars watched in silent witness. The crowd burst into applause in the steel and concrete hangar. They chanted, "Drake! Drake!" Their faces shone with relief and pride. Some cried with the joy of victory and loss. They wore hope against the damaged Earth they'd barely saved. Drake stood before them in a sharp uniform. His new admiral pins glinted on his chest. They felt like chains weighing him down. He touched the pins as his eyes moved over the crowd. He saw bandages and crutches, reminders of the cost. The noise quieted as Drake reached the podium. All eyes were on him. He cleared his throat. Though his voice carried strong, it trembled slightly. "Today we honor the fallen, the brave souls whose sacrifice shaped history. We will remember them. Their deaths will not be in vain." Overnight, workers had built the memorial behind him. Marble names of the dead stretched across the wall. Drake put a hand on the cold stone in a silent promise. They'd be remembered. Whispers of Operation Iron Sweep floated as the crowd left, a new campaign against their enemies. But Drake knew more battles lay ahead. He met Sivara's eyes and saw her resolve matched his own. Together they entered the strategy room with its map of enemy hideouts glowing red. "We hit them wide, then narrow," Drake said. "They're scared and scattered, but not yet defeated." Sivara nodded, studying the map. "They'll regroup if we let them. Our allies stand ready to join the fight." The ships prepared, loaded with intel. Crews checked each engine and gun eagerly. Drake boarded his flagship. The bridge buzzed with readiness. "All ships report," Drake ordered. Voices confirmed their status. Drake's hand hovered over the launch button, the gateway to distant battles. "For the fallen. For humanity," he said, and pressed it. The ships moved as one iron wave, set to purge their enemy from the stars. On the bridge, Drake stood with Sivara beside him. Ahead lay infinite space and distant stars, beacons lighting the path to lasting peace. Orcs 6 filled the main screen, marked with the wounds of war. Drake stood steady on his flagship's bridge, hands behind his back. The planet symbolized the weakening grip of the Threxian Empire. Now it stirred with rebellion's spark. "Do this right, we'll have their anthem sung here in a week," Drake said to Sivara. She nodded, eyes on the surface below. In the ship's gut, the infiltration teams got ready. Their stealth tech hid the ships among the stars. Drake had clear orders. Back the rebels, keep the Threxians blind. No fireworks until I say. The troops listened. Every move was planned, quiet as empty space. Supplies loaded efficiently, crates of blasters, power packs, data chips. The teams left, slipping through thin air down to Orcs 6. On the surface, Drake met rebel leaders in an old mine. Their steps echoed in the huge caves. They huddled over rough tables covered in maps and radios. "You give hope to our fight," a rebel said. His eyes burned for freedom. Drake looked into each gaze. "Hope's good. Winning's better. We'll give what you need to take this planet back." Night fell on Orcs 6. Rebels moved through the streets, new confidence in their steps. They trained with the arms the humans brought. Drake watched the shadows, making sure every move stuck, every drill engraved. The rebellion swelled, backed by Drake's silent task force. Small wins pierced the night. Checkpoints taken, propaganda replaced by freedom's call. Whispers of a new dawn spread. As the first Orcs 6 sun rose, the Threxian base found itself surrounded. Not just by rebels, but by a people emboldened by ghostly unknown friends. With comms cut, they fought not scattered fighters, but a whole world united against them. On the command deck, Drake watched the garrison headquarters fall. Rebels flooded the barriers, shouting liberty as the flags dropped. Orcs 6 was theirs again. The victory blazed out, lighting revolt through the sector. Sivara tracked the spread, her screens ablaze with uprisings on neighboring worlds. "They're using your tactics," she said. News showed humans fighting for alien freedom. Drake's jaw tightened. "It's not about me," he stated. "It's about what we stand for." "But they see you, Drake. You're the Resistance's symbol," Sivara insisted, pride in her voice. Drake breathed deep, accepting the role thrust upon him, not for glory but for the countless now looking to him to herald their freedom. He stood firm, ready to lead humanity and its allies out of tyranny's grip. Drake stood in the strategy room, screens glowing around him. Senator Harris walked in, sharp suit and sharper eyes. Aides followed him, typing notes on pads. Drake's crew paused to watch the outsiders inspect their space. Harris went to Drake, looking at the medals on his chest. "Admiral, I'm here to check your spending. Let's see if this crusade is worth it." Drake nodded and shook Harris's hand. "I'll give you full access, Senator." For days, Harris shadowed Drake. He saw plans for hitting enemy bases, heard static-filled enemy broadcasts. The task force blasted a supply depot fast and hard. Drake commanded from the deck. Harris stood beside, watching the screen's silent blips for ships and lives. Icons danced and exploded. Harris flinched each time. Drake didn't flinch. Calmly he marked targets, issued flank, fire, retreat orders. It was over in an hour. More blue icons than red. Harris exhaled, eyes wide. Back in the strategy room, Drake's team cheered. A young officer told Drake excitedly, "Sir, depot's ours. They never saw it coming." Drake nodded to her, then Harris. "That depot fueled their ships here. Big blow." Harris crossed his arms, eyeing the glowing map. "Impressive tactics and control, Admiral." Weeks passed. Harris saw Drake's spirit drive the campaign. They didn't just destroy, they freed people. Harris heard cheers from liberated planets. One quiet night, Drake showed Harris a freed colony. Kids played, fearless. Harris watched, face unreadable. "You have children, Senator?" Harris looked surprised. "2 daughters." "Mine never saw Earth," Drake said, pointing at the screen. "Every kid we free out here. It's one step closer to no more war zones." Harris considered Drake, silent. "Maybe you have merit, Admiral, but your power can't eclipse the Coalition's principles." Drake nodded. "I serve the Coalition, Senator. We clear the way for peace. No more, no less." Harris turned to leave but stopped at the door. "Keep it that way, and I'll keep the bureaucrats off your back." Uneasy but firm, Drake and Harris's alliance held. Operation Iron Sweep pushed on. For every doubting official, 100 freed worlds praised Drake's name. War and politics stayed balanced for now. Drake led humanity to carve out a galaxy free of fear. Drake faced his squad, each man strapped tight in the stealth ship. Green light washed their hard faces. The nebula loomed outside, a swirling soup that ate ships. Drake stared at the nebula, studying its chaotic dance. "We fly blind," he said, his voice steady. They knew the risk. Training took over. They flipped switches, checked dials now useless in the nebula. Hands gripped controls, ready, not afraid. The ship shuddered, hitting the nebula. Colors shifted, screens blinked out. Ships drifted like ghosts. Hulls whispered through nebular gas. Drake's hand held the stick firm. Eyes scanned the dark, looking for the asteroid's faint shadow. Each move precise, each turn deliberate. There, a shadow on the nebula. The hidden base sat on the asteroid, pocked with craters. The ships landed soft on rocky ground. Drake's team moved fast, into the dim hangar bay. Footsteps echoed metal. They slipped inside quiet. The bustle gone. They found the weapons, crates of them. No sabotage this time. They had to take it all. Teams worked together, lifting and carrying. Back to the ships. Drake heard a voice. Not his team. From the shadows. "You're different," it said. Calm and clear. Drake turned to the alien, Arix, covered in shining scales. Its eyes studied Drake, wise and deep. "You know humans?" Drake asked. Arix nodded, stepping into light. "I've watched you. Learn. Adapt. I offer knowledge." Drake assessed Arix. Trust came hard. But no malice here. It spoke of twisting light, whisper drives. Arix handed a device to Drake, small and complex. "Use this to navigate the storms." Drake turned it in his hands, heavy with purpose. "We thank you," he said. Arix bowed his head. "Go. Prevail." The weapons loaded, the gift stowed. Drake's team left the base. Ships rose invisible from the nebula. Back on the Spirit, Drake showed Sivara the device, her eyes wide with wonder. "This changes everything," she whispered. Drake gave her the device. "Get to work. We have a war to win." The fleet prepared for the next fight, armed with stolen weapons and the promise of Arix's technology. The nebula no longer a barrier, but the start of their victory. The conference room was cold and stale. Drake stood at the end of the table, hands flat on the surface. Sivara and Senator Harris faced him, concerned. The device from Arix lay between them, harmless looking, but Drake knew the potential power it held. He broke the silence. "We can't pass up this chance," he said firmly. Weight of command made his words thick. Sivara nodded slowly. "But the risks?" Harris leaned in, face lined with worry. "Untested alien tech is dangerous. It could hurt the fleet." Drake listened, felt the tension, picked up the device cool and smooth. Risk of disaster, but a crucial advantage too. He put it down. His decision was firm. "We run a small trial, see how it works in a drill. If it fails, we stop." Sivara looked sharp, approving. Harris reluctantly nodded, relaxing some. "All right, Admiral, let's see if this is the edge we need," he said. In space, the Spirit led 3 ships equipped with the tech. Crew watched screens, breath held, as they started the alien system. Stars outside bent unnaturally, but ships stayed steady, hidden from Threxian scouts. They emerged undetected on the other side of an asteroid field. Cheers erupted as relief washed over comms. "Report, Sivara," Drake commanded, still wary. "Better than hoped, Drake. The precision, the stealth. We're like ghosts," she replied, awed and confident. Drake turned to the stars, silent witness. The tech was a new ally, lighting their path forward. For once, they had the advantage. Drake stood tall on the command deck. He watched the diverse aliens enter the room. They wore their race's colors. Sivara welcomed them with nods and smiles. The aliens gathered around a table. A hologram of the galaxy spun over it. Lights marked new alliance planets. One by one, the aliens spoke. The scaly Tavaran offered defense tactics. The feathered Solarian gave farming knowledge to prevent hunger. Drake listened and nodded. The offers were like music, promising to strengthen the new alliance. His hand touched the medal on his chest. The medal meant duty to the Alliance, a shield against threats. But some leaders frowned. They whispered power and glared at Drake. He saw them but stayed focused on the delegates. After the meeting, Sivara approached Drake. She followed his gaze to the frowning leaders. "They fear you," she said quietly. Her eyes showed the complicated politics. Drake shook his head slightly. "They fear change, not me," he said. "We've advanced too far for them." "Your leadership gave them security. They can't see that," Sivara asked.
Drake breathed out. "They see a soldier with support that's risky to them." His voice was even but carried experience with war and politics.
Drake watched the delegates leave. Their strides showed commitment to the Alliance. They were the galaxy's future. Drake would stand as their vanguard. The power flowed through him from humanity's spirit, not into him. This alliance embodied that strength. He would defend its right to thrive against all questions. Drake saw the distress light flashing on the map, a civilian group under attack in the outer areas. His fingers rushed over the screen, finding where the signal started. Threxians hammers civilians with cannons. Drake's jaw tightened. No time to waste. "Sivara, get the squadron moving." "Civies need help. Go now," he said into the radio. Drake marched to the hangar. His boots clanked on the metal floor. His squad got ready, suits on, weapons checked. The room buzzed with engines and the doors opened to space. They blasted off fast towards the coordinates. Stars blurred outside. Drake gripped the controls. Eyes flicked between screens and the black space ahead. They arrived to see Threxians attacking the defenseless convoy. Laser fire flashed between the ships. The small civilian ships dodged desperately. Drake's force jumped straight in. "Hit their weapons. Keep civilians safe," Drake commanded. Voice hard. Strategy clear. The squad swarmed the Threxians, tight formation. Explosions in space as shots hit home. Cannons disabled. Threxians scattered. Drake led them. Ship wove through debris and fired back. Threxians broke under the attack. Crippled Threxian ships limped away into the void. Civilians left in quiet aftermath. Drake's team circled them, watching for counterattack. Once secured, Drake docked the civilian lead ship. Airlock hissed opening. He stepped through with Sivara. Survivors murmured in the corridor. Tang of ozone from ionized hulls. One woman stood out. Sharp eyes. Deep curiosity, even after the battle. Dr. Ilara Meven, famous exo-archaeologist. "Dr. Meven," Drake said, extending his hand. "I'm Admiral Drake. You're safe now." Her grip firm, grateful. "Thank you, Admiral. Didn't think we'd make it," she said, voice steady. "We got your call," Sivara said, "and we know your work is important, right?" Ilara nodded, urgent and hopeful. "Yes, my findings could change everything against the Threxians." Drake and Sivara exchanged a look, another piece in the puzzle. "We need to keep you and your work safe. The Alliance needs your expertise," Drake offered. Ilara looked over the tired crew, turned back to Drake and nodded. "I accept, Admiral. Let's end this threat for good." Back on the bridge, Drake stood at the window. Ilara's data scrolled by. It could be the key to peace. The stars didn't seem silent now. The ship cut through the dark. They pulsed with the chance of victory, proof of human strength, always fighting for freedom. Drake stood in the command center, the room alive with the hum of machines and quiet murmurs. Monitors showed star charts and base layouts. Light cast sharp shadows on Drake's face as he leaned over a table, circling a blinking dot, highlighting a fortified base in the nebula. "The heart of the snake," he said, voice low but carrying. Sivara leaned beside him, tracing the nebula's holographic tendrils. "Our chance to take out their leaders." She brought up intercepted messages on her pad. "They're grouping here, still a threat." Drake faced the operatives, their suits bearing different insignia, but with the same resolve. "We strike deep," he said. "We end this." Across the ship, they armed explosives, memorized maps, and whispered codes. Drake pulled on his gear, the helmet fitting snugly, his breath echoing inside. Hours later, the ships slid out and veiled their approach in the nebula's dust. Drake's ship touched down, facing the shielded entrance. He signaled his team, and they fanned out, movements precise. Some planted explosives on the base's exterior, others hacked the security grid, tapping keys and whispering confirmation as they bypassed firewalls. Sivara linked to a dish, jamming enemy comms. "Uplink complete," she reported. Communications fell silent. Led by Drake, the third team infiltrated through a tight maintenance tunnel, breath thundering in the confined space. They emerged inside, a maze of corridors and rooms. Each turn posed a decision, each door a new danger. Through a view panel, Drake saw the unaware War Council, plotting their next attack. His team took positions as he counted down. The explosives detonated in precise fury, blossoms of fire shredding the base exterior. Klaxons screamed as soldiers rushed to their stations, comms dead. Drake's team moved fluidly through the corridors, covering each other in blaster fire. They burst into the council room, catching the Threxians off guard. Drake ordered them secured in cuffs before approaching the console, uploading data extraction software. The precision of each decision led to victory, loosening the Threxian Empire's grip across galaxies. Back on the ship, Sivara pored over the data, disbelief in her voice. "We've got them," she said. "Their plans, resources, weaknesses." Drake absorbed their triumph, his hand on her shoulder. Together they had shifted the tide. The Conclave in chains, the war machine crippled, the galaxy on the cusp of peace. The moon fortress of Tyrus Prime loomed massive in space. Threxian weapons dotted its surface. Blasts lit up the black sky, keeping Alliance ships at bay. On the flagship, Admiral Drake stared at the battle display. "Get me the strike coordinates," he said into the comm. Below decks, gunners ran to their stations. "Orbital strike approved," Drake confirmed. His finger stabbed the console to launch the attack. Energy beams sliced down from above, blowing anti-air guns apart in bursts of fire. Drake watched until the sky was clear. "Go now," he ordered. Dropships dove down fast, rocking hard as they hit the atmosphere. Doors opened, and soldiers poured out with guns ready. They moved toward the smoking ruins. On the ground, Alliance soldiers crashed into the Threxians. Blaster fire lit up faces locked in battle. When allies fell, the fighters got more furious. Drake's comm crackled with a ragged voice. "Conclave is ours." Drake closed his eyes in brief relief. Victory came at a cost measured in lives. He straightened, the weight of command heavy. "Secure their data," he said, "everything." In the captured base, fingers rushed across alien consoles, pulling intel and plans. Drake and Sivara read the enemy schemes. "They were about to strike back," she said. "Then Iron Sweep was necessary," Drake replied grimly. He turned to the gathered soldiers stained with blood. "This isn't over," he told them. "We keep fighting." Around him, the troops stood strong, resolve in their eyes. Drake led them on into the unknown. The war continued, humanity unwavering. Drake stood in the dim war room. The map of the galaxy hung before him, stars pulsing like heartbeat. He pointed at the clusters, battlefields all. "Hit and run," he said. His voice was low and steady. "We keep them chasing nothing until they're spread thin." The squad leaders leaned in, listening close. Drake moved his finger again. It stopped over a blinking node. "Here and here," he said. "Their eyes. Blind them, and they shatter." He looked to Shadow, his covert man. Shadow's face hid in darkness, but his nod came firm. "We'll leave them deaf and blind, Admiral." Drake left the war room. His boots echoed down the cold ship halls. The sound beat a war drum. He entered the hangar bay. Ships hummed, ready to prowl the void. Shadow's team slid into their vessel, ghosts in stealth gear. They left in secret, a whisper into the dark. The false attacks began. Explosions lit the distance, lies and lures. Like moths, the Threxian patrols scattered to the flares and noise. As they chased Shadows, Shadow's team infiltrated their relay base. The stolen blueprints guided them through mazes of paths and codes. Their fingers danced on alien keys. Screens went dark. On his ship, Drake watched the map blink and fizzle. Node by node, their network fell apart. No orders came, no backup arrived. "Now," said Drake. His order crackled on the comms. His ships leaped into hyperspace. They emerged in Threxian space, striking hard and fast, Lasers seared enemy hulls. Explosions bloomed in the void's silence. One by one, Threxian ships spun out dead and disabled, left as relics, burning in space. Drake's team struck like a surgeon's scalpel, every cut calculated, no move wasted. They operated as one machine, tuned to Drake's will. As the last ship winked out, the war room roared low in victory. Piece by piece, they dismantled the fleet without mercy. Drake faced his crew. Console lights lit their faces soft. "We dealt them a heavy blow," he said. His eyes were steady and clear. "But this war's not done. Repair, refuel. We move at first light. There's a galaxy to take." In that moment, as the crew worked, humanity's spirit lived on, unbroken in the silence of space. Admiral Drake entered the dim chamber. His boots echoed on the floor. The coalition leaders turned to look at him. Drake showed them a map with recent wins against the Threxians. One old leader cleared his throat. "Your victories are legendary, Admiral, but we have concerns." Drake met their gazes. "Caution is wise, but waiting helps the enemy." A stern woman spoke up. "It's not just tactics, you grow more influential." Drake felt the suspicion in the room. They feared his power could disrupt the coalition. In closed rooms, whispers became plans. They wanted to limit the hero they once praised. In his quarters, Drake sat in silence. His fingers brushed the cold table. He knew the tightening grip of bureaucracy around him. "Sivara, meet me," Drake said into his communicator. She arrived, concerned. Drake glanced at the closed door. "There are rumors to limit us," he whispered. Sivara stood beside him. "Fear drives them as it does our enemies." Drake nodded. He had uncovered traitors posing as allies. His loyalty was firm, but trust in leaders faded. "I won't let fear stop our mission," Drake said firmly. "We will complete it together," Sivara affirmed, "as we always have." Reports flickered on the screen. Drake turned to Sivara. In her eyes, he saw their shared resolve. They had faced impossible odds. They wouldn't falter now. Outside, stars kept vigil, indifferent to struggles below. Drake understood the cost of that indifference. He would defend coalition ideals, even alone against doubt's shadows. For peace, for security, for humanity. Senator Harris stood at the edge of the busy command center on the indomitable Spirit. His shadow stretched long on the floor from the bright screens and blinking controls filling the room. He caught Admiral Drake's eye and tilted his head, signaling he needed private talk. Drake nodded, walking over after telling some technicians what to do. They talked low and urgent in the empty hallway. "Admiral, there's a storm coming for you." "Not from the last of the Threxians," Harris said. Drake stood firm and met Harris's gaze. "Speak plain," he said. "It's the Council. Some don't like how strong you're getting. You're gaining power, and it scares them." Drake narrowed his eyes. His jaw tightened. He saw the worry on the senator's face and in his tense shoulders. "They want politics over safety?" he asked. Harris nodded. "You're a symbol. That frightens people without power." They were quiet in the hallway, only the ship's engines humming distant. Drake breathed deep and firm. "Time to remind them why I became this symbol," he said. Harris watched Drake's fists clench with resolve. Drake turned fast down the hall toward the comm room. His steps echoed firm on the metal floor. Inside, he entered a secure channel to the core Alliance members. The hollow screens lit up with different species faces, showing the diversity of the Alliance. Drake spoke clear and strong. "Friends, I come to you not just for Earth, but as partners fighting for freedom." They leaned in, eyes locked on the human who gave hope. Drake continued, "We're at the start of a new era. Together we beat a common enemy. Now we must keep the peace we fought for." They murmured agreement, showing deep respect forged in battle. Drake laid out his plan to keep their goals and stability. They nodded along with his every word. But in the human council chambers, some factions were displeased. Hushed talk of checks on the military ambition filled the room. Outside, though, races freed by Drake spread hopeful chatter and support across comms. Drake stood at the helm of the indomitable Spirit, eyes on the stars. His choice felt right. With the Alliance's backing, he was strong against factions trying to challenge him. They had all seen humanity's might under his command. Under him, they would never back down from their hard-won peace. The command deck was quiet with tension. Drake stood still as he stared at the hologram map, showing a small sector. Blue lines crossed the map, scrambled signals picked up by Sivara. The ship's engine hummed under their feet. "Report," Drake said firmly. Sivara worked the console swiftly. "Admiral, too much energy there for a dead star. Threxians digging up Ziridium." Drake raised a hand to silence the room. "That mineral makes their hulls invincible. We have to move." Sivara nodded. "Now." Drake faced his officers. They met his gaze, understanding the situation. "Full attack," he ordered. "Operation Granite Shield starts immediately." They agreed, resolve in their voices. Drake walked the corridors as his heart pounded with each boot step. This was it. The dropship bay doors hissed open. Troopers piled in, faces steeled for battle, gear checked, helmets on. The Coalition's best, but even they felt the chill of what was coming. Dropships ghosted down through space toward the mining planet. They fired thrusters to land on jagged terrain. The grey, cratered surface loomed below. Drake jumped out first, boots kicking up dust. He signaled the advance and the soldiers fanned out, guns ready. Threxians swarmed from the mining tunnels like shadows. Gunfire shattered the silence, energy pulses thudding. Drake led the charge, weaving behind rocks and firing short bursts. Up close, claws met human grit. "Sivara, we need help," Drake said into the radio. "Coming, Admiral." Explosions above rained debris on Threxian fortifications. Their machines tumbled down the ridge. The mining camp became a maze of combat, Drake in the thick. Each step a deadly dance. They pushed the Threxians back, securing, then pushing forward. After minutes that felt like hours, the last resistance crumbled. The flag was planted. The mineral was theirs. Aftermath was exhaustion and casualties. Wounded were dragged away as medics worked desperately. Drake surveyed the fallen, their sacrifice plain on his face. They'd won, but echoes of loss filled the silent planet. "Secure the Ziridium," he whispered to Sivara. She nodded, already coordinating. The mineral was vital, but soaked in blood. Drake closed his eyes, honoring the dead. A strategic win, but the scars of this battle would stay with them. Drake's fingers froze solid as he hit the cold keyboard, pulling up the latest war reports. The updates on his screen looked horrible. Red dots spreading across the map like blood spilling, systems falling to the new Threxian enemy. Sweat dripped down his temple while he scanned the flashing warnings. The radio hissed to life with a message that hammered home how bad it was. "Admiral, emergency news," the clipped voice said. "Krell, a Threxian warlord, just took over. The rebel groups are joining together." Drake froze, hit hard by the news. The soft hum of activity on the bridge faded as he thought through what he just heard. "Show me," he said, voice like steel. The officer tapped at his console, zooming the map onto the troubled systems. Each captured star was a knife in the Alliance's side, every Threxian victory a wound draining their strength. Drake stood, his shadow stretching long and alone on the floor. His face was carved deep with concern and an unbreakable will to act. He had to move fast. Sivara walked up, a silent support. She slid a tablet over with intel on Krell. "He's cunning and vicious," she whispered. "His victories are quick and merciless." Drake took the tablet. Reports detailed Krell's horrors. Civilians butchered, soldiers executed, systems gripped by fear. The warlord's lies about Threxian power were poison, and the rebel groups swallowed them in desperation. Drake's grip on the tablet tightened, knuckles white. "I need options, Sivara, ways to cut him down before this gets worse." She nodded, fingers dancing to pull up attack plans. "We might be able to isolate him, disrupt his supplies." But the Alliance's whispers were getting louder, and he couldn't ignore them. Political players in the coalition whispered doubts, using Krell to fuel their own ambitions. Drake's leadership was unraveling. The meeting room doors hissed open. Senator Harris entered, face grim. Drake watched him, a statue waiting for judgment. "Admiral Drake, the Council is concerned," Harris began, cautious with his words. "Krell's actions make them doubt everything." Drake squared his shoulders, faced the senator. And what do they want? To surrender to fear and politics while the Threxians rebuild and slaughter? Harris shook his head, clearly uneasy. They're afraid, Drake. They see Krell's rise as your failure. They want a vote to remove your command. A muscle in Drake's jaw twitched, his hand curling into a fist, but he kept calm, ice over raging fire. Tell the council fear won't decide our actions. Remind them of Earth, of our sacrifices. I won't step down while the threat remains. Harris nodded, suit sharp against the room's backdrop. I'll relay your message, but prepare. Politics can be as ruthless as any war. Harris left, the cold truth lingering. Politics could kill like any warlord. Krell's victories were sharp thorns, but the doubt they created was the real danger. Drake turned to Sivara. Get the fleet ready. I want an attack plan to stop Krell in an hour. We strike hard and precise. Sivara nodded, eyes reflecting Drake's resolve. They were united against Threxian cunning and political games. The room was silent as Drake planned. The air felt heavy with approaching choices. Outside, stars burned oblivious to the turmoil within. The fight ahead was twofold, a unifying warlord and his people's fading faith. But Drake knew one thing: he'd never give in, not to enemies outside or within. His will was steel, his command iron. He'd face Krell and remind the coalition who Admiral Drake was. The empty surface of Relka Five stretched with only dust and rock below the night sky filled with stars. Admiral Drake was the only one. He stood on the grey dirt facing the old meeting circle marked with stones from a long-lost people. His plain uniform blended into the shadows, under the weak sun far away. Total silence covered the dead moon without air or life. Then ship engines rumbled and broke the silence. Krell, the Threxian warlord, came out of the lowering ship. Even far away, he looked big. His heavy boots stomped towards Drake on the hard ground, very different from Drake's soft steps before. Krell's presence dominated the area, pushing and unmoving. They stood face to face in the circle. The galaxy watched through cameras sending video everywhere. Drake stared straight at the warlord with steady eyes. Krell half smiled in a smug way, sure he was stronger. Krell, Drake spoke clearly and steady, breaking the still quiet. This stops now. Pick mercy and join the Intergalactic Alliance, or keep fighting without mercy. Krell laughed hard, shaking the loose stones. Admiral, do you think me stupid? Your offer means nothing. I won't bow. The Threxian Empire will return, and your kind will fall first. Drake didn't move. His face stayed the same, hands still at his sides. You have no empire left, Krell. Only bits chasing a past that won't come back. Join us, and help make a future. Krell's eyes burned with the fire of won battles and destroyed planets. I would rather see humanity burn than watch it spread like a disease. The angry tension in the circle was obvious, but Drake stood strong against Krell's hate. The galaxy will see your real intentions. This is your last stand. The broadcast drones circled silently like vultures, catching everything said, showing Krell's hateful words to billions. In that moment, Krell's image as a leader for the broken Threxian groups shattered into hate and bloodlust fragments. The meeting on Relka Five ended without battle, but with the truth seen. Drake turned away from Krell, leaving him alone with the cold stones. Krell's refusal echoed everywhere, ruining his own goals and proving Drake right. As Drake walked back to his ship, his lone set of prints in Relka V's dust was a quiet sign of his strong search for peace against a foe who knew only war. The coalition's political games faded into nothing, the critics silenced by the clear truth shown on that empty moon. The Intergalactic Alliance's war room was abuzz. People crowded the room shoulder to shoulder. All eyes were fixed on the giant screen showing their forces ready for war. Drake stood in the center, commanding attention. We're taking this window of opportunity, Drake said. Nods of agreement answered him. Officers relayed Drake's orders swiftly. Star charts and facility schematics appeared on Drake's screen. The first hit struck an outpost at Abaris. Swarms of Alliance ships descended on cargo transports. Pilot voices filled the comms, mixed with laser fire and engines. Transports exploded into fiery balls against black space. Drake watched calmly from his flagship's deck, directing the assault. His eyes were hard with determination, the lifeblood of the Alliance. "Hit their comm array next. Silence their distress calls," he instructed. On the ground, Threxian bases scrambled defenses as dropships pierced the skies. Soldiers spilled out fast, boots hitting dirt. Distant gunfire sputtered, muffled by alien jungles. Sivara's fingers flew, slicing digital locks on a comm hub. "Now!" Drake barked as the door flashed green. Sivara nodded, working the controls. The door opened, revealing servers and comms. Sivara disabled equipment, sparks flying on metal floors. Drake kept watch, pistol aimed at the entrance. Only pops and sparks broke the silence. Success messages flashed on Drake's wrist comm. Piece by piece, they had dismantled Krell. The beast lashed out wildly. But it was too late. The screen displayed their progress, systems blinking to Alliance control. Drake stood among the tired, triumphant allies. Under his leadership, they had turned the tide. "Keep up the pressure," Drake said. "We end this now." His words galvanized the weary warriors. The surge of support after Drake's stand energized the task force. Drake's name echoed with reverence across the stars, synonymous with humanity's spirit. The Alliance stood strong, unified, ready for the next fight. The Threxian dropped his head. Hands tied, he sat slumped in the cold room. Drake stood over him. Fixed stare. The captured enemy knew Earth's fate rested in his words. "Talk," Drake said. The officer shifted in the chair, uneasy. Then spoke. "Krell, he has a fleet, ready to attack Earth." The officer's voice cracked, admitting his betrayal. Drake gripped the table, hard. "Where?" Drake's voice bounced off the bare walls. "Coordinates are in my uniform," the officer replied, nodding at his pocket. Drake signaled Sivara. She stepped up and took a small data chip from the officer's pocket. Drake put it in the holoprojector. The map of the galaxy appeared. Blinking red dots showed Krell's hidden threat. Drake turned to his officers. "Get the fleet ready, we need a distraction." No hesitation. They rushed from the room to carry out his orders. The bridge buzzed with energy. Crew scrambled to stations. Ships of the Coalition formed up on screen, armed, fueled, ready to fight, to protect Earth and the Alliance. Drake addressed his officers. "Group 1, bait them. Get Krell to chase you." The officers saluted with pride and duty. Group 2 gathered in the hangar. Drake geared up with them, Sivara at his side. They boarded a dark stealth shuttle, engines growling to go. "We slip through once the fleet engages Krell," Drake said over the noise. "We board his ship. End this." His team nodded. They had danced this dance before. Each knew the stakes. The shuttle shot from the open hangar into vast black space and distant stars. It streaked toward the hidden enemy fleet. The G-force crushed them back into their seats. On the bridge, screens showed the bait fleet meet Krell's forces head-on. Lasers sliced space. Explosions bloomed. The main fleet kept Krell busy, protected Earth. In the shuttle, the team checked weapons, secured masks, ghosts moving through the chaos, silent promise to end this war. Approaching the enemy flagship, Drake's pulse spiked. This was it, the moment they had fought toward, sacrificed for, bled for, victory within grasp. The shuttle slipped into an underbelly bay, quiet, unseen. The team blew the hatch and moved swiftly through metallic corridors, encountered guards. Brief plasma fire echoed. The strike team pressed on toward the nerve center, toward Krell. There, in dim light, stood Krell, surprised, then enraged. Drake stepped forward with his team, guns raised. Krell bellowed. But his words meant nothing now. Humanity stood resolute before him, no more words. The fight exploded in noise and plasma. Bolts ripped the air. Drake moved with purpose. Each shot brought Krell's end nearer. Far away, the indomitable Spirit's crew watched it unfold on video, saw the chaos, held their breath. Then the moment. Drake stood over the defeated warlord. Tyranny extinguished. As the strike team took the bridge, Drake's voice came through clear. "It's done!" Cheers erupted fleet-wide. Relief and triumph washed over every Alliance ship. Krell's great weapon gone, its master fallen. Earth was safe. The Alliance heart still beat, defiant, unbroken. The war was over now. Humanity stood tall. The war roared loud in space. Drake's fleet danced, fooling the Threxian sensors. False targets filled the Threxian screens, pulling them from their hidden bases. On the hidden ship, Drake stood ready with his team. They wore armor, faces serious and focused. Screens showed Drake's other ships dancing and dodging. The hidden ship slid closer, unseen. It latched onto the Threxian flagship, quiet as a whisper. The airlock opened, smooth and silent. Weapons ready, the team spilled into the enemy ship. Red alarm lights pulsed down the corridors. Threxian guards stomped close, armor loud, guns thirsty for battle. Plasma bolts screamed through the halls, the walls burning where they hit. Drake's team fired fast and true. Their shots rang out, proclaiming humanity's refusal to lose. Drake led from the front, pistol cracking thunder, yelling orders over the noise. His team moved as one, dealing punishment. They clawed through the decks, squeezing the breath from the Threxians. Room by room, they neared the heart, the command center. Their progress was relentless, showing human stubbornness. Blood pooled on the cold floors, human and Threxian. A record of the struggle to end this tyranny. The command center doors loomed large. Drake set the charges. The team braced. The blast buckled the doors, blowing them inward. The team burst through like a storm, sweeping to the command center with unstoppable force. Inside, Krell's last guard stood ready, determined to the bitter end. Gunfire crackled. Metal burned bitter. Drake moved measured, each shot proclaiming Krell's defeat. The strike team surged forward, hope against annihilation, ready to face the warlord, to end this war, to carve a future from oblivion's jaws. Drake's boots hit the metal floor of the Threxian flagship hallway. His team moved alongside him, weapons ready, controlling their breath. Sivara hacked the doors, and they slid open, allowing access deeper into the enemy ship. When they met Threxian soldiers, they danced a precise death dance. Burst fire, move, take cover, burst fire, again. Soon the narrow halls were silent once more. The command center was ahead, locked tight behind thick metal doors. They set charges, red lights blinking. Explosion tore open the doors with a screech. The room inside felt tense, ready to ambush them. Krell stood immense among his kind, armor gleaming for battle. His heavy plasma rifle hummed with power. Drake stepped through the smoke, pistol aimed at Krell. His team fanned out behind him. They traded plasma blasts, the room flashing with deadly accuracy. Sivara dove to a console, fingers flying over controls. The team laid down cover fire, hammering Krell's shields. Krell roared loud over the noise, challenge and promise of revenge in one sound. Drake moved closer through the firestorm, steps precise. Human and Threxian eyes locked, the fate of the galaxy held in one gaze. Krell fired, the shot searing past where Drake had just fainted. Drake rolled, closing the gap. Krell swung his rifle like a club, but Drake anticipated it. Ducking low and twisting Krell's arm, the rifle clattered to the ground. Unarmed but not beaten, Krell backed to the command throne, punching a crimson self-destruct button in desperation. Alarms blared a warning as a countdown started. "He activated the self-destruct!" Sivara yelled over the alarms. "Evac now," Drake ordered. They sprinted for the exit as a mechanical voice counted down. Krell laughed, the sound drowned out by chaos. "Die with me, humans!" Drake paused, calculating. He glanced at defiant Krell, then followed his fleeing team. They raced through maze-like halls, urgency driving them. Escape pods awaited, salvation in metal and glass. They piled in, strapped down, and jetted away as the flagship exploded into a flaming bloom behind them. Krell's final spite consumed by the ship fire. Safe in the pod, Drake watched the flagship's light flicker and vanish against black space. They had seized survival by a thread. The galaxy still hung by that thread, now firmly in human hands. Smoke choked the command center and consoles sparked. Drake's soldiers pushed through, shackled Warlord Krell, shouting curses as they dragged him along. "Move!" Drake yelled over the chaos. "We've got minutes!" They shoved through the crowd, escaping to safety as the ship groaned, ready to blow. Drake's communicator crackled. His second reporting the fleet was pounding the enemy with all they had. "Keep at 'em, we're coming out," Drake replied. They burst into the docking bay, the stealth ship waiting like a ghost. Sivara checked her countdown. Seconds left. The ramp dropped with a thud. They hauled Krell inside and strapped into their seats as it sealed shut. Drake hit the thrusters. The ship slipped free, engines flaring as they sped from the doomed flagship. Drake watched the rear screen as the enemy ship swelled brighter. "Now!" he shouted. They banked sharply, barely missing the explosion that hammered the enemy fleet. The Alliance ships dove in, lasers crisscrossing as the flagship blast threw the enemy formation into chaos. Drake's ship shook, but held as they raced from the destruction. Drake looked to his resolute team. They'd done the impossible. The enemy was crushed and the Alliance victorious. "Good work," he said heavily. "Let's go home."